So welcome along to A Story to Tell with me, Richard Beauvoisin. This is mainly taken from my Radio Bath show every Thursday morning from 10 until 12. If you do like it, don't forget to subscribe, share it to others and let everyone know all about Radio Bath. Hope you enjoy it.
Straight to you. Listen for me through the echo. Through the echoes. Through the echoes.
Good morning, everybody. It's Richard Beauvoisin here, right until midday today. I'm back from holiday. Just be saying to Gerard about the fact that I was in Bali, Singapore. All amazing places. If you've never been to that part of the world, then do go. It's very strange. We've got a new chair in the studio since I've been gone, and it's quite weird. I feel like I'm a director. It's quite nice, but it's quite low. It's weird at the same time. Anyway, what's today's show about is all about perimenopause and the menopause. The lovely Annette Pettitt is sat opposite me now. We're going to be chatting about it over the next couple of hours. If you have any stories or any questions you'd like to know about menopause, obviously neither of us are doctors. I'd like to point that out very quickly. We're going to be having an open conversation about it. But if you have any questions or want to say your story, then email studio@radiobath.com, or you can text Bath followed by a message to 80011, or you can go onto my Facebook profile, Richard Beauvoisin, and you can see it on there. So going to be back with Annette very shortly. Good morning, everybody. Now, in a really professional way, and this is really professional, Annette. Good morning, Annette, by the way.
Good morning, Richard.
There we go. Not only am I now live on the radio, but I've been asked, because my daughter is a massive Benson Boone fan, and the tickets have gone on sale, and I'm trying to actually buy tickets at the same time as presenting live on air. I have to say, neither action are going very well at the moment. I haven't got the tickets, and I'm now talking about it live on air.
Great. Well, multitasking.
So,
we all know
Annette,
about that.
just talk for a minute while I do... No, I'm joking. So, good morning. I'm back from holiday. We're going to be talking all about the menopause today. Now, before we start, I must make this statement. Neither myself or Annette are qualified doctors in any way, shape or form. What we're going to talk about today, Annette is somebody that has going through perimenopause and has experience about it. This is our third time of doing this show. We've done it for the last 2 years in May. And it's been really interesting to see kind of how things have changed. We're going to talk about that as well. But if you have any questions, any medical questions whatsoever, then please see a doctor. Yeah. There we go. Is that a fair statement?
That's fair.
Fabulous. So, Annette, first question I've got for yourself. You've come in for the last 2 years. Thank you very much for doing that. Why did you want to come in again and talk about the menopause?
I think the menopause is the first sort of significant medical thing that's happened to me in my life. And when I was going through perimenopause, none of my friends were really talking about it. I have got older friends. I realised that they hadn't talked about it with me. It wasn't something we discussed. And I just think it's really important that we do talk.
Yeah, I mean, Davina McCall a few years ago did her programme, which kind of brought it much more out into the general public. But there hasn't been much since then.
No, but I guess she kick-started something, and then we've got to carry that on, which is precisely why we get together and talk about it.
Yeah. Do you still feel like there's a stigma about it?
Not so much. My general opinion is that people are being more open about talking about it, which is fantastic. I guess for some people that might still be the case, but
yeah. I know when, I've turned 50 now, and for probably the first 40 years of my life, I didn't even know what menopause was or perimenopause, because it wasn't part of my society. The people I was surrounding myself with weren't going through it. Obviously, for the last 10 years or so, I'm surrounded by people of my age that are kind of going through it. So it's been very different for me.
Different for you in terms of?
Different for me in that I now know much more about it,
right,
and I can appreciate it, and I wish I'd have known much more about it when I was younger, which is why we're doing these types of programmes, to kind of give some insight to it. Now, very quickly, I'm going to read the statement about what is perimenopause and what is menopause. Okay, so perimenopause is a transitional period leading up to menopause, characterised by fluctuating hormone levels and irregular periods, while menopause is the point at which periods stop for 12 consecutive months. Excuse me. During perimenopause, estrogen and progesterone levels change and ovulation becomes less regular. Once a woman hasn't had a period for a year, she has reached menopause. There we go. So there's the official part, because I'd heard of menopause, but I hadn't heard of perimenopause.
Yeah, I mean, I'd barely even heard about menopause, so it was all a bit of a new topic for me, full stop. But yeah, as soon as you start looking into it, I mean, there's lots of information available on the internet. So as soon as you start Googling menopause, perimenopause will come up, and you can quite quickly identify as a woman what you're going through, which section you're in.
Absolutely. Now, we're going to cover all of the symptoms and stuff. When I say all of them, some of the symptoms a bit later on. But first of all, Annette, I'd love to hear your story. So what's your menopause and perimenopause story?
Well, just briefly, because this is about everybody else having the opportunity to talk. But my story with menopause isn't one of these stories about how, terribly hard it's been for me. I actually thought, I realised I was going through perimenopause. My periods were changing. Things were coming at different times. Light periods, heavy periods, they were all over the place. But I thought actually overall I was getting on quite well with this whole menopause thing. I had a couple of what one could call hot flushes, but only like 2 of them. So I thought, yeah, I've got this sussed. But I was interested in looking into the science behind replacing your hormones and what hormones do. So I started reading into why we have hormones. And what interested me was when you look at the list of symptoms, it was like, these hormones do quite a lot for us. And I was starting, I think the thing that was getting me was my memory, like for names, remembering people's names. I was sat at a wedding and people were walking past me that I should have known their names, and I was having major panic attacks because, oh my God, I cannot remember that person's name. So I spent the whole of the ceremony trying to run through the audience and remember everybody's name so that when we went outside to mingle, I could remember. And I just remember that feeling of panic. And I think it was at that point that I was like,
And how did that feel regarding mentally for you? Because that must have been quite difficult confidence-wise and stuff.
I think that's the thing, is like, and I had a great memory and I was sharp and snappy, and then all of a sudden it's like, I cannot remember that person's name who I spoke to 3 days ago. And it just completely pulls the rug from underneath you and makes you feel absolutely sort of inadequate. And yeah, confidence levels dive really quickly.
And when was this? How old were you at this point?
That was, if I could remember my friend's wedding date, and there's a brain fog. But no, it was a few years ago. I mean, I am fully menopausal now. I haven't had a period, so I can't remember. But yeah, I think that was the point when I sort of thought, hang on, maybe this perimenopause is affecting me more than I think. And why is it that when you lose your hormones, you lose your memory and your ability to connect information together? So that was like, these hormones are doing quite a lot. I'd like to know a bit more about this. And that's when I started researching it.
So what did you do then?
Well, I went on the internet and did the old Google searches. And yeah, I decided after having read a lot of information, I mean, Davina at that time was sort of talking about it. So she had a book out. I read that. I looked at some medical research. I then actually booked an appointment with a private gynecologist. So I decided to pay for somebody's time. My GP was pretty good. I mean, I had conversations with them, but in the 10 minutes that I had with my GP, I just didn't get my questions answered. So I did pay for an hour with a private gynecologist time, and I really valued that information that I got from that expert.
And where was that based?
She was based in Bristol, based in Bristol.
So not too far away then?
No, and that was a really, it was a great experience actually for me. I know it cost me a bit of money, but I think it's worth investing in your health. Yeah,
I mean, you're finding out from the experts. GPs have an incredibly difficult job. One minute they're dealing with a teenager's acne, the next person coming along dealing with HRT, and they can't be an expert in everything. So going to an expert sounded like quite a good idea.
Yeah, I'm an accountant. I see myself like a GP. I know a lot of things about a lot of taxes. But, if I need a specialist who knows absolutely everything about one topic, I go to that specialist and get their advice. Or I, take my client and we go to that. It's the same way if I went to a GP but I needed a heart surgeon, I would go to a heart surgeon for specific advice.
Okay, so you went to the specialist and I'm guessing you started HRT at that point.
I did, yeah. She recommended that I went on HRT. And I genuinely thought that I really wasn't suffering that much from any symptoms. But once I started on the HRT, I personally had a really positive response to that. And within sort of 8 weeks, I just felt so much better. And the one thing I didn't realise was I thought I wasn't having hot flushes, but what I didn't realise was that at night time I was regulating my body temperature by doing the hokey cokey all night long. Arms in, arms out, legs in, legs out, like I was shifting around all night long trying to regulate my temperature by removing limbs from my duvet. I don't do that at all now. I go to sit, my head hits the pillow and I sleep for blessed 7 or 8 hours solid, and then I wake up in the morning feeling refreshed, and that's been the best thing about replacing my hormones.
Okay, so what's really interesting is that 2 years ago, I'm guessing you were still in perimenopause when we first started this.
Yeah, I probably was just at the end of perimenopause then.
And now you're at the other end of it,
yeah.
Which is, for me personally, quite an interesting thing. So are you still on HRT?
Yes, I am still on HRT. I take all 3 hormones. So I replace estrogen, estrogen and testosterone.
Okay, and testosterone isn't available on the NHS, is that correct?
It is not, no, I get that privately.
Okay, so explain very quickly what the difference is between the 3 if you can.
Estrogen is, I think, sort of the key hormone that I guess a lot of our systems within our body use. Progesterone protects our womb lining, so we need to take that in conjunction with estrogen. So if you're perimenopausal, you might go on a rotation of taking progesterone for 2 weeks and then not taking it for 2 weeks, whereas I take progesterone every night.
Okay.
And just take that in continuation. And I use the gel for the estrogen in the morning. And then the testosterone. So they all do slightly different things, but they are the 3 key hormones that work together to create a sort of fully functioning system.
Now, we're fully aware that HRT doesn't work for everybody.
It's not the only solution.
And we've got a number of stories that we're going to come out with a bit later on where HRT hasn't necessarily worked for everybody. I'm really keen to hear people's stories today. So we've got a number of stories that have already come in and comments and stuff. If you do want to email studio@radiobath.com, then we'll try and read it out. Feel free to stay anonymous as well, or you can state your name too. But we're going to be coming back with Annette with the next section very shortly. There's Robbie Williams there. He's performing live in Bath next month. I know, we nearly got tickets and then sadly didn't. I know, but never mind. He'll be back another time, I'm sure, won't he? Who knows? Anyway, it's Richard Beauvoisin here, rising until midday today. We're talking all about perimenopause and menopause with the lovely Annette Pettitt. We're going to have a little story to start with. Okay, so I won't say who this is from. Okay, they've asked to stay anonymous. But they basically said, I thought I was getting off quite lightly with symptoms until the past 8 months, especially since I had estrogen receptive breast cancer 12 years ago, so can't take HRT. Extreme muscular discomfort with my arms currently, which keeps me away from dancing, not just the knee. I'm listening to any podcasts and books they recommend whilst using diet, a wider range of protein, nuts, seeds, everything whole wheat plus cod liver oil and multivitamins, and swimming to try to control the discomfort. From what I've read, planning for the menopause before you reach it, as regards diet and exercise, is very worthwhile. Everything is gradually improving, so heading in the right direction. It's quite tough, isn't it? So certainly if you've had, let's deal with the topic of HRT and cancer very shortly. But obviously we had a cancer patient there and then can't take HRT. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, there are many other solutions to helping your general health, and of course menopause is just part of that journey, isn't it? And I just sort of think, well, I'm trying to do my best to invest in my health throughout my lifetime, basically so that hopefully I can avoid going into an old people's home and costing myself a fortune later on. That's my theory. And I think exercise and diet and approaching your whole life cycle, health in a healthy away as you can is a good idea. And there are many solutions and many options and everything. Each individual needs to listen to their own body.
Very much so. Now, there was that report back in 2002 that said there's a 25% increase if you take HRT of getting cancer. That was the statement that came out. It has been debunked in regarding that the study was done in ladies that were over 60, and also the statistic, although theoretically correct, wasn't actually the correct one. I'm actually going to read out what the actual statement was, and that is that the number of breast cancer cases expected in women without HRT was 3 out of 50, this is from the study, versus the number of breast cancer cases expected for women with HRT was 4 out of 50, so therefore it was 1 extra, but they quoted it as being 25% extra because 4 over 3 was 25% extra. So, but it's actually a very, very small increase, but I believe that's even been reduced more due to the way in which you can take it.
Yeah, I think HRT replacement therapies that you can use nowadays are very clever. They're very body identical. They're very natural. They're made from yams. I know in years gone by they were made from different processes, different products. But yeah, I'm happy that what I'm taking is replacing hormones that are pretty identical to what my body was producing naturally. I have decided to replace those hormones as part of my choices. But, you know, there are other ways of supporting your system as you get older. And
also, I've heard, you know, there's more of a danger the longer you are on HRT as well, and the older that you get. Do you, you know, you're now post 50. Do you now have a plan of how long you're going to take HRT? Are you thinking, right, I'm going to get to 55 and that'll do? Where are you at with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of constantly thinking about those things. I mean, my private gynecologist says to me, just take it forever.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm like, okay, cool, because I love it. I feel great on HRT, and I notice when I decrease any one of the hormones, when I decrease one of them for some reason, I ran out of testosterone earlier in the year, and it took me a few weeks to get it organised and get the private prescription back. And yeah, I noticed the difference of not having it. So, you know, I'm like, I want to keep going, and for me it is working in my regime. But yeah, she says you can take it as long as you want. I'm just sort of constantly watching, and I will just make that choice to the best of my ability as I go along. And if maybe I'll wean myself off at some point. I don't know if I'm just replacing my hormones now, and then I still have to go through the process of coming off the hormones. Maybe that's...
Well, I think if we look at the world and the world of humans, if we go back a couple of 100 years, average age life expectancy was kind of 50, maybe 60 if you're really lucky, and that is still the case in some parts of the world. And therefore, you get to this point and you accept you're in old age. You know, we're all expected to live kind of till 90 or so.
I think that's what was my main driver. Was I was looking at it thinking, hang on a minute, I want to live a health cycle that's as long as my life cycle, and I'm expecting hopefully to live until I'm sort of 90. I was sort of 45 when I started looking into this, and I was thinking, I'm only halfway through, and these hormones clearly do a lot in my system. So, you know, if I can replace my iron, why don't I replace my hormones and keep that going for the length of my life, or a larger part of it? And so that's my plan.
So Charlotte's put a question in saying, Charlotte, who's up next, of course, between 12 o'clock and 2, does magnesium help menopause?
Well, I think magnesium supports bone density and bone growth, and I personally don't take extra vitamins and minerals. I like to try and use my diet to keep that as varied as possible. But yes, I think magnesium helps your bones, and as we get older without our hormones, bone density is an issue.
I mean, I've certainly found, we were discussing off air about the fact that I take an energy tablet every day. I have a very active lifestyle, and I have a very good diet. I'm vegetarian, and I eat generally very, very well. But I still take these energy tablets. I've actually changed the brand that I've been using recently, and I've looked into it, and they don't quite have as many things in there as the normal brand that I have. And I've got really tired at night. And I'm thinking, why is that? And the only thing that's changed, apart from jet lag, but the only thing that's changed has actually been these pills. So maybe some supplements in some ways are good generally, not just for the menopause.
Yeah, exactly. I think like magnesium is sort of more of a general health. And of course, menopause or reducing hormones impacts a lot of things in your body, and supporting them in other ways, like using magnesium, like going weight training, like making sure you have healthy sleep habits, can all be just as beneficial.
Now, I've been really intrigued. 2 years ago when we first started doing this show, I looked at it and thought, nobody's really talking about menopause, or it's kind of like it's in the background for people. And I wanted to see how it's changed over the last couple of years since we've been doing this. And I found it fascinating that 2 years ago, there was definitely a massive stigma on being perimenopausal or menopause.
Yeah, I think people didn't talk about it. And I think of some, like I said, my older friends who definitely didn't talk about it. And I feel sorry now that they went through menopause without talking to their closest friends and having that support group. Whereas I think, I've ended up with the support group, which has been great. And I noticed much more in the last 12 months that people are starting to have little phrases like, oh, I'm just having a menopause moment, and it just making it part of the conversation, and it's okay. Yeah.
And it's very difficult for somebody to come up and, just in natural conversation, you're talking about the weather and whatever it may be that us people around here talk about, and then say, oh, let's talk about perimenopause. So a little tip which I've got for people that I've definitely used a number of times myself if I want to broach a topic which I find sometimes difficult to shoehorn into a conversation is, I was listening to a radio show today about the menopause, and then that's an easy in to start a conversation off. Have you done that yourself?
Yeah, I think, like you say, like woman to woman, the conversation, it's very personal. It's about somebody's personal health. Somebody speaks to me, they say, oh my God, I'm going crazy. I texted my friend at 10 o'clock in the morning saying, yeah, I'll pick up the kids from school today. And then I forgot to pick up the kids from school. So I get a call from the school office. I just feel like such an idiot, And I'm sitting there screaming, going, yeah, that's perimenopause. You might only be 42 years old, but that's definitely perimenopausal, And you should speak to your GP or, And but, of course, how do you start that conversation without just blurting out, that's menopause?
I found it really difficult myself. I teach a lot of ladies who are in their 40s and 50s, and again I see a lot of their symptoms, and I look at it, obviously I'm not a medical expert, but you look at the symptoms and they are literally shouting at you in the face. Do I feel like I can say anything as a man? Probably not. Yeah,
I think that's why we have this conversation, is just hoping that it might help somebody, male or female, start to have those conversations, or because it's the important thing is with your family relationships and your partner relationships, as a man being able to have those conversations and start those conversations.
Yeah, there are many books out there, and I will have a research during the break about there's one particular book that is Men and the Menopause, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on. But if any man is looking to get I'm going to use the word brownie points, then find out about it, because you can then start to understand a little bit more.
I think that's the key thing, isn't it? Understanding. And some of the messages that we've had through for the show today have definitely said, my partner understands. And that's great.
Yeah, and it's obviously, I say men, but it can be women, of course.
Of course.
So, your partners as well. The last bit I'll get on this is what I've really seen and noticed, and a number of ladies have spoken to me about it, is how it's changed in the workplace much more. And there now seems to be much more understanding in the workplace about menopause.
Yeah, hopefully. Because I know, I'm an accountant, I've got many clients, I speak to them regularly, and I know that some of my clients have said to me in the past, I have, now when I'm going into a professional meeting, I have to do so much more preparation, I have to kind of pre-think of questions and pre-prepare the answers, because I just can't think on my feet the way I used to be able to, and I just, I don't want to look foolish or, and I just think, so much pressure, but I genuinely hope that in the workplace it is the situation that people will be understanding that maybe as if you're going through menopause, coming up with information at that second in time is not such an easy thing to do. And that
no, and it's I say I've just heard quite a change, which I still think is in its infancy, of people in the workplace understanding that it's a difficult thing to do, and it's not somebody going crazy.
Yeah.
And that's the key part. It is simply the menopause. We've got loads coming up. We're going to talk all about the symptoms next. Yay. Richard Beauvoisin here right until midday today with Annette Pettitt. We're talking all about the menopause.
Look around your world, pretty baby. Is it everything you hoped it'd be? The wrong guy, the wrong situation, the right time to roll to me, roll to me. And look into your heart, pretty baby, is it aching with some nameless need? Is there something wrong and you can't put your finger on it? Right then, roll to me. What happiness is to you? Clap along if you feel like that's what you want.
And we're back. Nearly forgot what I was doing then. Have you ever listened to Jonathan Pye, Annette?
No.
Have you not? So Jonathan Pye is an actor, and he has a fake podcast about a radio show, and he's a radio show presenter. And he always starts off every phrase or every link with, and we're back.
Right.
And he then abuses everybody for about the next 10 minutes. In a very amusing way, I have to say. It's a BBC podcast. Very good. You should listen to it. Anyway, moving swiftly on. So we're back talking all about menopause and perimenopause. A few little comments that have been made on Facebook, which we're going to read out, and then we're going to talk all about the symptoms. So Emma says, I think my biggest thing is the brain fog, getting emotional over the slightest thing, fatigue, joint pain, incontinence. The list is endless. I'm on HRT, which definitely helps. Joanna then said, I'm exactly the same, sitting in front of a patient and not being able to string a sentence together, or the brain fog stops me from thinking, crying at the stupidest of things. Unfortunately, the other half gets some aggro from it, but he knows it's not intentional for sure. Thank goodness for HRT. And then Jackie says, yes, Annette Pettitt, fly the flag for the hormonally challenged trying to make our way in the world, whilst we try to remember why we went upstairs to get something and don't remember the name of a kitchen utensil. So there you go. So thank you, Annette, for coming in today. It's always an interesting one, isn't it? Because you're saying part of your personal journey. And how do you feel about making that public?
Yeah, I don't mind. I'm happy to talk about anything, and being able to talk to friends who had gone or were going through menopause helped me. So I just think, well, I've got to pay it forward.
So you are paying that process forward. Right, we're going to go over now some of the common symptoms. And again, what was really interesting, when we first did the show 2 years ago, I did loads and loads of research about it. And there were probably about 10 common symptoms. I then did that same research last night about it. And I think it was in the dozens. It was about 50 odd.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
That came up now. We're not going to cover over all 50 of them, because that would be boring radio. But we are going to cover over a few of these. And we're going to play, and I've done this before with prostate cancer when I did this. And are you ready for this, Annette? We're going to play perimenopause bingo.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to tick off the ones that you had or you didn't have. Okay. Because not everybody has all of these symptoms. Okay. And I'd also like to know kind of almost what you did about it, if that's okay. Right, so first one, irregular periods. As menopause approaches, menstrual cycles may become irregular, with changes in the frequency, duration and flow of periods.
Tick.
So you got that one.
I got that one.
You got that. And is it quite a strange thing? Because I've been married for a long, long time. Not always the same person, but I've been married for a long, long time. So I've kind of gone through it. And some people are really regular. Some people not so regular. Some people have heavy periods, light. Kind of, how did it change for you then?
Yeah, so I think that was the most irritating thing. And, going from regular periods to suddenly going sort of months without anything. And then suddenly one would appear and it's like, oh my God, you're just not prepared for it. And it just completely throws you. So, coming completely unexpectedly, really varied intervals between periods. One period would be extremely light. The next period would be like I was giving birth all over again. It was, confusing.
And I suppose that I know a lot of ladies have a calendar for, like on their phones.
Yeah, you
and
can
I should be coming on right now.
Yeah, forget that.
Just
out the window.
And again, that must be, I'm thinking of the anxiety, because obviously what you don't want to have is, I'm trying to think of the right word of saying it, but any accidents that are going to be embarrassing in public.
Oh, I had that. Oh, yes, I had that. I was on the middle of a ring of mountains in the Italian Alps, walking really high up with no shop anywhere within reach, completely taken by surprise by a menstruation period. And what was I going to do about that?
There you go. I'm guessing tissue at some point, but let's move on from that moment. Hot flashes or flushes and night sweats. So you mentioned earlier you were suffering with this a bit.
Well, yeah, I'd sort of had 2 hot flushes, but I genuinely thought I wasn't suffering from hot flushes, that I apart from a little bit of brain fog and obviously irregular periods, which I knew would pass anyway, so that I was just a case of getting through that period. But the hot flushes and the temperature, I didn't realise I had as a symptom until I started taking HRT, and actually all of that completely regulated itself again because of the hormone replacement. So that was great, actually, realising that I was suffering more than I realised.
Yeah. And that's there was a lady which I used to teach dancing to, and she was really, really struggling with perimenopause. And she would have the scenario that they'd be getting ready to go out in the evening. She'd have a shower, she'd get dressed, she'd do all of her makeup, and then she'd have a hot flush and literally have to start the entire process again. And I saw some of her hot flushes as she was coming for dance lessons. She'd look completely normal, and then all of a sudden, poof,
Yeah.
out it all comes. And it was just, she was drenched.
Yeah, I think, there's the sweating that comes with it. It's really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I didn't have that, thank goodness. But like I said, the hokey cokey at night time, I didn't realise how much it was actually disrupting my night's sleep, just because I was so busy kind of being hot and cold and hot and cold.
Well, let's talk about sleep disturbances then. So some women may experience difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep, leading to disrupted sleep patterns and daytime fatigue. Now, I'm ex-military as well, and part of the training that I had was actually depriving yourself of sleep for a number of days to see how you then acted, because that could be what happened in wartime. And it's a form of torture.
Well, it is. I mean, that starts from when you sort of have kids. You have kids, don't get sleep. Have teenagers, don't get any sleep. Then you get menopause, don't get any sleep. So it's just a continuation.
Is there a period in your life where you've had some good sleep?
Well, now, because I'm taking my progesterone each night, that tablet makes me sleep like a baby.
And your teenagers are now not teenagers.
Yeah.
And so sleep disturbances definitely is one of those. Love this next one. Vaginal dryness and discomfort.
Yes, I guess a little bit of vaginal dryness. I'll semi-tick that one.
Okay.
I'll half-tick that one.
And,
certainly changes, different.
Yeah. And obviously regarding the sexual side of things, I think we said before, it's one of my favourite comments you ever made, there are products for that.
Yeah, you don't have to replace your hormones to solve that one.
No, that's okay. Mood changes. Now, this is the one which I think a lot of people really, really struggle with more than anything else in the world. Mood swings, irritability, anxiety, and even depression in some women.
Yeah, I think all of those things, and just so many, and along with that, confidence and anxiety. Did you say anxiety?
Yeah, anxiety's in there, irritability.
Yeah, anxiety is one I really notice among various friends. Just excessive levels of anxiety, really, and that's debilitating. I feel really sorry for women that struggle with those extra things when life's hard enough as it is without having to cope with anxiety and depression on top of it. I fortunately didn't get that one, so it's a no from me from those. I don't know why, but I've just always have the same. I'm the same every day, not up, not down. I just and with menopause and perimenopause, that actually didn't change, so I didn't get like the aggro or the depression or the anxiety.
But I'm guessing you know quite a few people that have.
Absolutely do, yeah, absolutely.
And it's, the one that I've seen more than anything else is people questioning their decisions as well. Just kind of, I'm making the decision, or am I? Oh, and then starting that process off.
Yeah, all of that. Yeah. And of course, those are things that you don't have to replace your hormones. You can do things, meditation. You can take various vitamins to help you. I think vitamin D is a great one. I take vitamin D through the winter. I think this country lacks a lot of sunlight. And vitamin D, I'm sure, helps everybody. Yeah.
And again, we were talking about I take energy tablets, which has vitamin D in it, and magnesium, and vitamin B1, 2, 5, 12. Any of those, if you do the research, all of those can help whether you are menopausal or not.
Yeah.
If you are requiring all of that. Changes in sexual function. So it can lead to a decrease in libido or changes in sexual satisfaction.
Yes, a tick for that one too. So that changed. That definitely was different. I definitely felt a sort of really surprising quick shift from my previous sexual life to my now sexual life. There was definitely sort of almost an overnight change, and that's what I think surprises me, how quickly things change. And that's something that the testosterone, I think, can help with.
Okay.
I think testosterone helps with your muscle mass. I think it helps with your memory. I think it does. When I don't take my testosterone, I notice I'm not as sharp. And
maybe you don't.
Yeah, or maybe I don't. But yeah, earlier this year when I didn't have it for a few weeks, that I definitely, and I was so glad when I got my testosterone back in and working and functioning. And yeah, the testosterone, I think, has a lot to do with libido.
So regarding the testosterone, just very quickly, it's not available on the NHS. So
No.
how do you get your testosterone then?
So I just contact my private gynecologist once a year and have a little chat with her, and then she does a repeat prescription. So I spend a bit of money. I think the prescription costs me around, I want to say £80, and then I pay something like £40 for the prescription. But I think, that lasts me nearly a year. So.
Okay, so 120 odd pounds.
Yeah, it's not extortionate money, and I love how the whole set of hormones makes me feel.
Obviously, for anybody else, as I mentioned earlier, we are not doctors, so please do go and see an expert on this fact. All we're doing today is trying to create the conversation around it. 2 to go, changes in skin and hair. Menopause can lead to changes in the skin, such as dryness, thinning and increased wrinkling. Hair may also become drier and more brittle.
Yeah, so that definitely happened. I think collagen can help with that. So if you don't want to replace your hormones, collagen can definitely help with your skin and your hair. But yeah, it definitely goes where you had sort of, when you put your hair in a ponytail, it was quite a thick ponytail, and then all of a sudden it's quite a small ponytail.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the last one here is weight gain and changes in body composition. Many women may notice an increase in abdominal fat and a shift in body shape during menopause, even with no changes in diet or exercise habits.
Yeah, absolutely. The old middle belt.
It's the bit that I've noticed more in people than anything else.
Yeah.
Certainly ladies that have got to that point that I've known for a number of years that have been one particular body shape, all of a sudden, as I say, kind of have that middle belt.
Yeah, it's weird. Why do you have to do that? I don't know. That's just cruel.
It's just cruel. And it's again, just from my perspective, I find it very difficult to then talk to that person, because it may, I remember one of the worst teaching things I've ever seen in my entire life. A lady had just passed a teaching course, and it was week 3, and I was there supporting her, and she was looking down at the class. It was a really busy class, and she turned down to a lady that was in the front row and said, "When's it due?"
Oh no, I thought you were going to say you did that.
No, it wasn't. On this occasion, it wasn't me. My filter was in place on this occasion. It often isn't. And this lady wasn't pregnant.
Oh no.
So that is an awful thing to try and get past. But equally, you could turn around to a lady and you can't really turn around and say, "Oh, you've put on some weight." No, you've got a bit of a tummy now. You didn't used to have that. You can't say that. So how do you kind of broach that topic in your girlfriends?
Well, I guess we just all moan about the extra roll, but it's just part and parcel of it, and you can use diet and exercise to try and stretch it all out a bit, keep eating and just stretch it so that the fat fills it all and makes it smooth.
And it must be difficult again, just regarding clothing and stuff, because things fit differently.
They do, and that it's so many changes all at once. It's no wonder we sort of struggle to adapt to it. It's
really difficult. Now we're here right until midday today. If you have any stories or any questions you want to ask, then email studio@radiobath.com. Got lots coming up between 11 and 12. Welcome back. Then it's hour 2 with Richard Beauvoisin here, right until midday today. I'm with Annette Pettitt, and we're talking all about perimenopause and menopause. Just had a message in from your partner, Alex, okay? And she says, waking up and listening to Mum Pan on the radio. Go Annette. P.S. Can we have a shout out, please? They've put a little picture as well, which you can't see because it's on the other computer. But they're both looking very happy.
That's quite a good shout out from them. It could have been much worse.
Could it?
Yeah.
Because when I mentioned that I might be saying something, you generally looked quite concerned.
Yeah, I was a little bit worried then.
You really were concerned. But we're talking all about perimenopause and menopause. If you have any questions or stories that you'd like to say, your experience of it, then email studio@radiobath.com, or you can text Bath followed by a message to 80011. Now, when I was out in Bali, there was a day which was called the pool party. And I was out there with a number of dancers. There were 160 of us out there. And I may have had a couple of drinks at this moment, but I started chatting to a good friend of mine called Lindsay, and people in the dance world will know which Lindsay this is, as in Lindsay that helps run Rock HQ. And we started talking about the menopause, even in our drunken state. And then I messaged her a couple of days ago saying, we talked about it. Would you mind saying what your story is? Because it isn't a standard story. And she said yes. So I'm going to read out Lindsay's story now. Thank you, Lindsay, for sharing this publicly with everybody. So yeah, I'm going to read this out and then Annette to get your thoughts on it. So she says, Dear Richard, with regards to your programme on the menopause, I wanted to share my own experience, particularly to highlight that HRT isn't for everyone. Like many women, I found myself struggling with hot flushes, weight gain, and increasingly irregular periods. I eventually had a phone consultation with a nurse who prescribed HRT. I was surprised that no tests were required, but grateful to be offered something that might help. The impact was almost immediate. Flushes eased off, my periods became regular again, but the flip sides, my periods were now longer, heavier, and for the first time in my life, painful. Still at the 3-month review, I happily accepted another 6 months prescription, relieved the sweats were under control. However, things got stranger. My periods continued to worsen. I'll spare you the details, but they weren't pretty. And I began reacting to my cats, something I'd never experienced before. A bit of digging suggested that increased estrogen via HRT, or estrogen I should say, can heighten allergies like hay fever. Who knew? I also started to feel not quite myself. Then came a turning point. I went on a skiing holiday and disaster. I forgot to pack my HRT. At 52, and she looks good for it, I was the eldest in the group and no one else had any, so cold turkey it was. To my surprise, I felt better. Maybe it was the mountain air, exercise, laughter and friendship, or maybe the hormones don't vanish overnight, but I didn't miss the tablets at all. More than that, I started to feel like me again. Once home, I decided to stay off HRT and see what happened. And here's the thing. My allergies vanished, my periods lightened, albeit irregular again, and I have so much more energy. It was a real awakening. Now I'm tackling my menopause my way, with good food, regular exercise and a healthy dose of defiance. That midriff belt so many of us struggle with is fading, and I'm focusing on building a bit of muscle. My theory is that it'll help stretch out the ever-creasing skin. No idea if it's true, but it's keeping me motivated. I know HRT can be life-changing for some, but I just wanted to share another perspective. Sometimes listening to your body and trying a more natural route can be just as empowering. What's your thoughts on it?
Agreed. Yeah, so I mean, it's funny listening to that because HRT gave me that feeling like myself again and energy levels. And that's what it did for me. But, you know, it's not for everyone. And as Lindsay quite rightly says, listen to your body and find your solutions.
Yeah. Now, we're going to talk about some theoretical solutions for HRT. Now, again, what I'd like to mention now is that neither myself or Annette are doctors in any way, shape or form. If you have any questions regarding this, then please do see a qualified medic. There we go. But there's the holistic approach, which is kind of where Lindsay's now going, which is diet, exercise, relaxation, sleep and purpose. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I incorporate that as part of my life choices anyway. So yes, I take HRT, but I also strongly believe in exercise. I try and get variety of exercise into my life, and I particularly try and focus on some strength training and weight training because I believe in the bone health.
Okay.
And yeah, diet. Yes, I try and eat a varied diet. I think these days with all these sort of mass-produced foods available to us in our faces, it's very hard to concentrate these days on having a nice, healthy, basic, varied diet.
Well, time is such an issue for everybody, isn't it? You know,
Yeah.
I get to the end of the day, I'm working during the day, running the business, doing the radio show and that type of thing, and then I'm going out dancing in the evening. Sometimes I've got half an hour to cook. I'm going to really struggle to make everything from scratch.
Yeah.
Realistically.
That's right. And so it is hard. I think it's harder nowadays to actually get that natural diet, healthy diet into your life, but it can be done, and I think it should be done. I think it's a really important part of my health journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Hormone therapy, we've spoken about this, known as HRT, hormone replacement therapy. There's lots of different ways of taking it as well, aren't there? Some are better than others, is that right?
I don't know about better. I think again it's just unique to each individual. So I can't remember if I said, menopause moment. I can't remember if I said the right word for the hormones at the start of the show: estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone.
You did say it correctly.
Oh,
just
good.
let you know.
just remember if I was saying the word progesterone correctly. So I take the progesterone tablet at night time, and I have recently been put on what I believe to be a slightly cheaper version of the progesterone tablet than what we were originally being provided by our GP. But I have been fine on the cheaper version of the tablet. It hasn't affected me. I know some people it has affected. So I think those individuals could go back to their GP and say, hang on a minute, I want the other stuff because it's better. And yes, it costs more, but it works better for me. Whereas I've been fine on this recent version that I'm on, Get Prex or something. I can't remember the actual brand name of it. But I've been fine on that progesterone. I take that tablet every evening. It helps me sleep. I love it. Estrogen, I use the gel. I'm quite happy with the pumps of gel. You can use a sticker. You can have a patch.
There's different ways. There's normally tablets. You can do the under the tongue tablets as well. There's the gel and there's the patches.
And there's sprays.
And there's a vaginal way of doing it as well, I believe.
Yeah, vaginal's more topical as in specific for that area. But I've got friends that use the spray. I moved on to the spray and had sort of symptoms rear their head again, so I quickly went back to the gel. I was like, no, I'm not changing anything because I love it. But for some people, I think whatever suits you. The gel fits in my routine in the morning. The spray is super easy. Just dries very quickly on your arm, and
I believe the gel is slightly better than the tablets. The tablets go through the liver and the gel goes straight into the bloodstream, I believe, is my understanding of it.
Oh, there you go.
But again, please do seek some qualified medical expertise rather than a bloke on a radio saying about it.
Or a woman on a radio.
So that's HRT, which is part of the solution.
Yeah, and it has, I think, worked well for me. I'm happy using it. I might be just delaying the inevitable. Maybe I've got to come off my hormones at some point and have that downturn, but I'm going to do it when I'm sat in an armchair and I don't need my memory quite as much as I do right now as a working mother of a busy household.
Fair enough. Non-hormonal medications such as selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs.
They help with anxiety and depression. And I think they can be also used in menopause, and because anxiety and depression are some key symptoms of menopause as well. Okay,
I mentioned this one earlier, vaginal estrogen. So just straight there.
Yep, that's more sort of area specific.
Okay, and the last one that's on here is lifestyle changes, which I'd like to talk about for a couple of minutes. So, it's making certain lifestyle changes. So dressing in layers and using a fan or a cool cloth, for instance, to help with the hot flushes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are many ways that you can, obviously opening windows.
Yeah, in here, in the studio, is boiling. I feel like I'm having a hot flush myself right now, but I'm pretty certain I'm not. Relaxation techniques, yoga, Pilates, meditation, all of these things.
Yeah, and there's some great apps around that you can use for meditation. So there's loads of resources really available nowadays, I think, between apps and local yoga classes and local meditation classes. And I just see that as part of the whole tool kit for dealing with getting old.
Physical exercise, dancing, for instance. Yay! Let's mention dancing. It's definitely something which will help on the anxiety, the mood, and the physical exercise as well.
Without doubt. I mean, after a few hours of dancing, I defy anybody's ability to walk out of a dance hall and not have a massive smile on their face. It just gets those endorphins going, and of course that's going to help with feelings.
Absolutely. Whichever style of dancing you wish to do, I'd like to point that out as well. Having that healthy diet as well. So again, these lifestyle changes, making sure that you have a healthy diet rich in fruits, vegetable, whole grains, and also trying to limit caffeine as well. How do you feel about that?
Boo. I'm not doing that.
Are you not doing that?
No, that I'm not doing. I refuse that.
Do you? Do you know what I have? I have now gone on to a different way of doing it. So I now stop drinking caffeine at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And I have to say, my sleep is better for it. So
No.
if we're looking at increasing sleep, then maybe some caffeine reduction will be better.
Oh, well, I'm going to stick to my progesterone tablets because I get my sleep and I still get to drink my coffee throughout the day.
Fair enough. Remembering all of these is really important. If you want to go and speak to somebody about it, then do go and speak to a qualified physician about that fact. We've got lots more to come. Again, if you do have any questions whatsoever, then do email in studio@radiobath.com, or you can text Bath followed by a message to 80011. Here till midday today, talking all about the menopause with Annette Pettitt. So it's Richard Beauvoisin here right until midday today with Annette Pettitt. We're talking all about the menopause today. We've covered so far, Annette, quite a lot about the menopause and the people that are going through it, i.e. women.
Yes.
We're now going to talk about everybody else.
Excellent.
Because, you know, people often think it's just the women that are going through it that are affected. But who's been affected in your life by you going through the menopause?
Well, I think it's a bigger question about hormones, and you've got hormones when you come in, when you're a teenager, hormones going out when you're older, and that's all happening often in one household at the same time.
What a fun household that is.
Yeah.
You know, having teenage girls and teenage boys, let's face it, they're going through their own hormonal aspects as well, and then the hormonal mother.
Yeah, exactly.
Blimey.
I don't think we really, that's the thing I sort of think, hormones have such a massive part in our lifetime, and we don't really talk about all of those hormones together as a family that much.
We often talk about teenagers being an absolute nightmare, but it's very hard to then say, well, the mother's a nightmare as well.
No comment.
But we are going to talk about kind of how it affects everybody. Whether you are a teenager yourself and you've got your mother going through it at the same time, or you're a partner and you've got your partner going through it. Nobody really thinks about, it's quite often, if somebody's ill, for instance, nobody thinks about the carer.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're kind of going to look at, not quite saying that partners are carers here, but they're kind of in that mode of they are not the one affected directly by what's going to happen, but they are indirectly affected by it.
Yeah.
I've got to be very careful here because, again, I've seen this scenario where people say, well, you're not going through it, so what have you got to complain about? But it's not always that easy for everybody, is it?
No, and you've got the impact.
Yeah, so we're going to look at a few separate sections. So emotional and psychological support. So in your life, you've gone through it yourself. How were you supported by people around you?
I think because I was just sort of getting to it was sort of at the point in time when my friendship group weren't really talking about it. It was sort of in those days when it was just a topic that was starting to be talked about. Whereas now I think my younger friends have got the benefit of it being talked about more. So perhaps we sort of discussed it a bit more. And yeah, I think, you know, I think about blended families where you've often got stepchildren coming into a household, perhaps when they're teenagers, and you've got menopausal step parents and all of those kind of impacts. And I'm not sure that people really do understand it from wider impact it's having on the whole family.
Well, it's very difficult. The emotional support, and you know, I know a number of people that really struggled with somebody's mood swings, for instance. In one moment, their partner was as normal as they ever are, and the next, they're off doing one thing or another that doesn't kind of make any sense. And the partner is left there going, what's going on?
Yeah.
And that must be really confusing.
I think so. I mean, as I said, unfortunately, or fortunately for me, I didn't really have mood swings. At least I don't think I did. My family haven't fed that back to me. But my mood is very constant, and the menopause actually didn't impact me that way, which I feel quite grateful for, because I've had partners in the past, and I know that, premenstrual tension just prior to the period, we would have episodes of fluctuations, and it's really tough to cope with as a partner. I've got female partners, and I've been a partner with somebody going through PMT, which is very similar to menopause, basically same hormone issues fluctuating, and it's really hard to stay calm.
Really hard to stay calm. And I think I go back to one of my favourite moments I had when I turned round and I said to somebody, "You're having a menopausal moment," whilst they were slightly having a mood swing. Let's just say I wasn't that popular at that moment.
No, that didn't go down well. But I'm not sure there's a right thing you can say in those moments. We're talking about hormones. They're completely irrational.
Yeah, and so what would be, in your opinion, let's say you were having a mood swing and I was your partner, let's go for that, down that route. What would be the right thing for me to do at that point?
Stay calm, mute, and no,
run.
Run, yeah, run for the hills. No, that's the thing about it, is those hormonal swings are so irrational. That's why teenagers' behaviour is sort of so, you just think, and the parenting advice is just hunker down, and wait it out. It'll come right in the end. They'll come back to being a normal human being, and it's the same with sort of menopause. I think it's just every situation is slightly different. Do you go for the softly approach, or do you just stay quiet? Or I think space is always a good option.
Yeah, giving space whilst giving support. That's always the hardest thing to do. Yeah. But I also think running is a really good idea. Just run away. No, not at all. No, I think the word that I'm going to use here is patience. Yeah. That's the key part, is having understanding. There's some amazing books out there that you can actually get, all available on Amazon and other terrible places as well. But let's talk about menopause. Of course, that can be anyone. Talk about menopause. There's loads and loads out there that you can do. Men take a pause. There's just loads of books, and any education you can do as the partner to understand what your partner's going through will be hugely beneficial. From the partner's perspective, the sexual changes, that can be quite difficult to deal with as well. You mentioned earlier on, and thank you for being open about this, it kind of almost changed overnight for you.
Yeah, I think, we talk about menopause symptoms and coming on gradually, but actually that's the thing about menopause, is that some of it's gradual and you don't notice it happening, and other things just seem to appear overnight and you cannot understand what's changed. I think the libido for me was one thing that literally just within the matter of a few days kind of completely changed. And, I think there's lots of words being bandied about now about health, your life cycle, your health cycle, your sex cycle, all of these things, trying to get all those graphs to align perfectly throughout the whole of your lifespan. Yeah. And that menopause has a big impact on that part of the graph, the sex cycle, the sex life. And it's about adapting and redefining. It's just different. And
I think some of it is accepting as well, that it's not necessarily going to be the same.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of adapting to the changes, and it's just going to be different, and that's okay. Yeah,
and it is simply just different. And I often say regarding dancing, if it goes wrong, it's not wrong, it's a
variation.
There you go. See, very well trained. And it literally could be something that's just, it's now a variation on what happened before. Yeah. The difficulty is that you may have had 20 years of what was happening before, and now it's different. And that might be difficult for the partners to try and cope with that as well.
Yeah, and that's the key, isn't it? All about that communication and just letting your partner know how you're feeling, and so that can be understood, and then becomes less frustrating for your partner, who is also part of that sex cycle or sex lifespan.
Absolutely. Now, we mentioned earlier about sleep deprivation for the person that's going through it, but also the fact that you might be tossing and turning and doing the hokey cokey as you described earlier, that will also have an impact on your partner's sleep. And then what's great is then you're both tired.
Yeah.
And then that makes for a happy day.
It does make me wonder, perhaps in other generations, like my grandma and grandpa ended up sleeping in different beds. And I just wonder if that's like actually just another tool for dealing with menopause, not having HRT at that time, and just sleep in separate beds. So we actually both, you don't get a good night's sleep, but your partner does.
Yeah, absolutely. The key thing I want everybody to realise on this is that it's all about communication.
Yeah.
It's about talking to your partner, or talking, if you don't feel like you're going to get, as the person going through it, the responses you need from your partner, then actually talk to other friends. I often talk about the fact that you can't make a dog meow. It's not the dog's fault that it can't meow. It's just that's not how they're built. And it might be your partner isn't built for talking about it. It's not their fault. That's just who they are. So you might need to talk to other girlfriends or male friends as well.
Yeah, I think generally in life I utilise my friendship groups and, my family and my partner for all of my needs, being met, and you're just not relying on one person. I personally don't rely on one individual person, and it's great to have such a huge support network amongst family, friends, and my very supportive partner.
One of the things that I found very interesting recently is that I was actually out for a group meeting, or not a group meeting, a group meal with a group of men. And we ended up talking about the menopause.
Great.
And I thought, wow,
Yay.
I can't imagine. Normally we'd be talking about whether PSG beat Inter in the Champions League final.
Ooh.
I know, fascinating topic. I have no idea who won. But no, we were talking about the menopause.
Great. And that's why we do this radio show. And
it's all about talking. So again, if you want to bring up this topic with somebody, easiest way to do it is say, I listened to an amazing radio show on Radio Bath today. And we were talking about the menopause. If you've missed any of this, by the way, it will be available as a podcast later on today. Type in Radio Bath to any podcast provider. You can catch up on any of this, or the previous 2 episodes, or the previous 150 episodes that I've done on the radio show as well. It's time for another break. We're back with Annette with the last part shortly. Every second of delight. Groove is in the heart. It's Richard Beauvoisin here on Radio Bath for you, talking all about the menopause today with Annette Pettitt. Lovely. Now, we're going to talk about men again shortly, and something called Adam. But first of all, there's lots of myths about. One of the myths I'd like to talk about is menopause leads to memory loss and cognitive decline. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, that's the bit that I think a lot of people I know would agree with, and that was actually my main reason for looking into HRT. It wasn't so much because I thought I had other symptoms, because I wasn't suffering overall from things like hot flushes, but my father suffers from Alzheimer's, and that episode that I mentioned earlier in the show about being at the wedding ceremony and really not being able to remember people's names that I should have known. And so for me, it was like, memory. That was a really big concern for me. And dementia, Alzheimer's is one of my key drivers for my sort of thinking about my long-term health. And so I was looking into HRT replacement mostly for the memory side of things, because there is some evidence to suggest that replacing your hormones does help with dementia, Alzheimer's, and that's what I was interested in, and that's what I was speaking to the specialist about primarily. And actually menopause symptoms were a secondary issue. Okay. So I looked at the research and that's been done recently. There aren't great studies that have been done. Some more studies have been done recently in America, but of course we've got that old study that was done on a very specific set of individuals who were already past menopause. Yeah. And it's a very narrow set of data, and it's not a good study. So more work is being done on that subject now, but there is evidence to show that there is potential heart health benefits through replacing your hormones. The arteries not getting clogged up, and some possible benefits in dementia or memory loss. And I think, brain fog and memory loss and forgetting to pick your kids up from school is an absolute reoccurring theme in anybody that I speak to that's of this age group. And certainly my memory is the thing that I do notice now. So yeah, for me, replacing my hormones, and I think the testosterone helps me a lot with that. As I said, I was off testosterone for a few months earlier this year, and it was my memory and it was my sharpness that I noticed had gone downhill. And since I've started replacing the testosterone again, that's my sharpness is back, and I'm loving it.
Well, the strange thing for us is that you've been coming to my studio for a decade now. I worked it out the other day.
Oh.
I know you've been coming for a long, long time. And I saw the person that was pre-perimenopause. I then saw the person that was perimenopause, and I've now seen the person that's menopause. So for me, that's quite an interesting thing. And I remember saying to a number of people when you first came round is that in 1 hour's lesson, I would normally get through about 4 hours worth of content.
Because I was onboarding that information.
You were on it.
Yeah.
And then there was a period where I was getting through maybe half an hour's worth of content in the same time period. And that was obviously at that point where brain fog was kicking in and you weren't as sharp. And it was, I was the constant in all of that. And I definitely saw the change. And then in the last few years again, the old Annette's back.
Yeah. And that is absolutely, you don't realise, because it is a gradual process, and then you don't realise what's going downhill. And then, unfortunately for me, the hormone replacement therapy, along with my other lifestyle choices, diet and exercise, etc., I feel have put me right back on track, which is great.
The old Annette is back, which is good. Now, we're going to talk about something which is a new topic for me, which I'd never really looked at before, but something called ADAM. So ADAM is understanding androgen deficiency in the ageing male. I am now...
an ageing male.
Thank you for that. I wasn't going to say that. I was going to say young and vibrant, but apparently, according to Annette, I'm an ageing male. So this is not HRT. Men don't go through the menopause.
But they have hormone loss.
But we have hormone loss. So we have testosterone decline. As men age, their testosterone levels naturally begin to decline, often starting in their 30s, which was a long time ago for me, at an average of 2% per year. It's not a sudden shift. It kind of just drifts off. Obviously, it's different with everybody. So from the age of 30, your testosterone levels go. What are the symptoms of this? I'm just going to read some of these out. This is officially known as the male menopause, but it's not necessarily that. It's called ADAM. Reduced muscle mass and strength. I've noticed that recently myself. So I've always been quite well toned in the upper half of my body. The middle section has not necessarily been as well toned as I'd like it to be, but that's just wine. But I've definitely noticed around my chest area, and that like the joining between my chest and my arms, there seems to be extra skin.
Room.
That there never was before. I'm quite well built up there, but there's extra bits there that never used to be there before. It says here increased body fat, particularly around the abdomen. That's called wine. And other things as well. Change in the physical appearance, hair loss, decreased bone density, hot flashes similar to what the ladies go through, and swollen or tender breasts in some cases. I'm now holding on to mine. I think I'm okay just for now. But again, emotional swings, mood swings, loss of motivation, self-confidence, sleep disturbances. Again, lots of these similar things for this reduction in testosterone. Obviously, we don't have the estrogen issue, but we do seem to have some of those. Reduced libido. As you get older, you want to do it less as such. Erectile dysfunction and infertility in some cases. And again, this can have similar strain. So let's look at a man who's 50. Let's quote me, for instance. I'm 20 years into reduction of testosterone. Let's look at a partner that I might have that's in their 40s as well, going through HRT. It's quite a combination, Annette.
Yeah, it's those hormones have a big impact across the whole family, across really your whole life. So, I think it's important to understand that everybody's going through these changes. And yes, menopause is a little bit more in your face, but male people have a reduction.
Male people.
I was going to say male partners, but of course all partners don't have to just be male. But
no.
Have a reduction in hormones too, and that is impacting on their self-confidence.
Absolutely. It's something which, until I did the research, I'd not really come across myself.
You don't think about it and don't talk about it, maybe.
And I suppose because it's such a gradual thing as well, I'm trying to think of the scenario. I know I mentioned earlier that men were talking in a group about the menopause. Were they talking about their own testosterone levels dropping down and having a lesser libido? not so much. No, it's not something that men would talk about. And I'm always intrigued, I'm of the understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but ladies often talk about sometimes bedroom antics amongst their friends. Would that be a statement that would be fair?
I guess that's up to the person. Yeah, some do, some don't.
But I can't think of any scenario where, as a man, I've spoken about my bedroom antics with other men. It's just not part of our culture.
Is it? I think that's a generalisation. I can't believe that's true of every male group.
No, I'm sure there are some men that do, but I've been part of many different male cultures and male dressing rooms and, done many, many sports. At no point do we talk about actually what we're doing apart from, hey, we're doing it every night type thing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, maybe not on a personal level on your own activities, but there's a lot of...
So I think as men as well, I think men need to talk about this much more.
Yeah, and I think that's a general sort of topic across all areas, mental health, about the communication and about that it's okay to talk.
Yes, absolutely. And we, earlier this year I did a mental health episode. Again, if you want to listen back to that, go to Radio Bath at any podcast and you can listen back to the mental health awareness one. We spoke quite a lot about the fact that it's just great to talk, and that's really quite important. There are some misconceptions around about Adam, which is, I'll say what it is again, androgen deficiency in the ageing male. And it's the same as a midlife crisis. That classic thing when a man in their 40s goes, I really must get on my big motorbike again and ride around with my hair that's now thinning, flowing against the wind. It's not the same thing. So they're not related at all. And it's definitely not the same as the female menopause as well, because we are talking about, although obviously we spoke about testosterone for yourself, that's the only one that we kind of tend to have.
Well, I was just thinking about that, actually. I wonder if we'll ever get to a point where men replace testosterone from the age of 30. I use a little sachet of testosterone because it's not licensed for women. It is licensed for use outside of the UK in women, but we have to use a product that is typically used by men. So men will take an 8 milligram sachet per day, whereas as a female, I use 1/8 of that sachet. So my sachet, where it lasts a male 1 day, it will last me 8 days. So I sort of squeeze out a little pea-shaped like a bit of toothpaste and rub that on my arm, and that's enough for a female hormone replacement regime. I just was thinking, well, why can't men replace their testosterone?
Funny you should say that, Annette. So, how do you manage this? It's also known as andropause, by the way. A balanced diet, regular exercise, adequate sleep, stress management and weight management can help alleviate symptoms. That sounds quite familiar.
Yeah, we've been talking about that,
haven't we, for 2 hours? But it also says medical treatment. In some cases, testosterone replacement therapy may be recommended by a doctor.
Yeah, so I guess for some people that are being, you've got the whole range of the population, and some people are going to be affected by this more than others.
Yeah.
And for them, maybe, being able to replace testosterone is going to give them that sense of self back.
Is there a way, and again, I don't know the answer to this one, of actually measuring how much testosterone you have?
Yeah, you can take a blood test, and some GPs, when you start on HRT, will send you for a blood test. I mean, I'm not sure of the purpose of doing that, really, because you're just taking your hormones at that one precise point in time, and you could have had an egg for breakfast and then read highly on your estrogen. So I'm not sure about taking a blood test, because it's just giving you that snapshot of that one particular point in time that you took the bloods. But I think testosterone is the one thing I think that has a much more long-term effect. And as I said, I went without it for a few months this year, and it was about 6 weeks before I really started noticing the difference, and it took 6 weeks of me taking it again before I noticed the difference going back in. So it wasn't an overnight thing. But my specialist does ask me to do a blood test to test my testosterone levels once a year, and I think that testosterone can be tested fairly accurately, because it's either at a certain level in your system or it's not. It's low or it's high. Okay. Much like an iron test, I think.
So if you are a man and you are struggling with something like this, then maybe some medical help would be a good thing. Now, of course, All today has been about creating a discussion. Neither myself or Annette are medical experts. If you've listened to something and think, oh, that's a good idea, I'll do that, please do not take our advice. What I need you to do is go and see a medical expert, and that is the way forwards for all of this. Thank you, Annette, for coming in. It's our third time of doing it. We'll be back next year in May again to chat all about the menopause, because it's going to always be there. It really is. I'm back next Thursday between 10 and 12. Charlotte is up next. Hope you have a fantastic week.